Contradictions of our time. The explanation. There is more to philosophy than just the rightness and wrongness of theories and arguments. There is its method. In fact, that is where philosophy has its real value. It does not so much teach people what to think, but how to think. And when rightly applied, this can have a profound impact on society in many ways. Consider the religious skepticism of David Hume in the 18th century. Europe was still emerging from the socio-political hold of medieval Catholicism, which, as most Catholics today would admit, was corrupt and oppressive. Their authority rested on dogmatic religious beliefs, including what science should tell us about our origins, and any contrary views were effectively suppressed. Hume systematized skepticism about these dogmas, and his impact on Western society was more fundamental than that of Darwin or Einstein, even though this is not widely appreciated. Now, we appreciate Darwin and Einstein because it is their theories that offered an alternative way to seeing the world and its history, but it was Hume who made way for these theories to be considered by moving religious belief out of the way. Hume made room for the great scientists and did so by applying a method of analytic skepticism to prevailing religious belief. In other words, the house had to be demolished first before its replacement was built. Hume himself was not anti-religious, he was just a skeptic. If the prevailing belief of that time had been atheistic, he would have gone to work on that just as well. Yet there is more to Hume's philosophy than just method. Behind method is insight, a perception of reality that is unique and enlightening, something no one else can see. Method then becomes the mode of inquiry which serves the insight. The insight in philosophy now is mostly destructive, by which I mean it is best at seeing what is wrong with beliefs than what is right. However, this is done not out of some sort of rational malice, but rather to serve the pursuit of truth. We just don't want to get things wrong. So rather than destructive, I should say that philosophy is deconstructive, constantly trying to break down weaker foundations of knowledge so that they can be replaced by stronger ones. For Hume, the insight was an awareness that the human mind is vulnerable, that it is disposed to believe things that aren't necessarily true, and that it habitually forms beliefs which it projects onto reality and treats it as if it were real, such as causation and necessity. For Thomas Kuhn, another great philosopher of science, it was a recognition that scientific revolutions were more fundamentally sociological than empirical or scientific, and that scientific theories could not be compared so that we can call one more true than another. Therefore, for Kuhn, there is no such thing as scientific progress, because an independent measure of truth by which all theories can be compared just doesn't exist. There is no God judge of science, as it were, except ourselves, and we ourselves can't be the judge because we're the ones producing the theories. Something or someone more independent is needed. For Immanuel Kant, it was the insight that our perceptions of the world and the theories used to systematize them are as much a reflection of our own dispositions, our rational tendencies, than about nature itself. When I see a brown table, what I see could be partly explained by the fact that there is something like a brown table in front of me. But if this table and all its attributes are somehow dependent on the way I see them, then do I really see the table as it is in itself? So those like Kant and Descartes say that we can't. The reality we see is presented to us, not in the way that it is in itself, but partly because of just how we see it. Anyway, it is in service of these insights that philosophy, aided by its method, is applied for the benefit of all those who genuinely seek understanding. What characterizes these insights is their ability to take on prevailing beliefs, expose their errors and assumptions, and in doing so make a lasting contribution to mankind, which suffers too easily from closed-mindedness and the vices that follow. No culture, no ideology, religion, academic discipline is without its limits of knowledge, its epistemic limits, and in many cases, its errors. And a true believer in anything is one who has the courage to seek out the errors and limits and yet believe what they believe with an open mind. And by an open mind, I mean the possibility that they might be wrong. So it's in seeking out the errors and limits of what they themselves believe. Such a person has achieved, or would achieve, something beyond what any expert in science or religion or politics can ever achieve on their own. Rational independence. It is from these remarks that I introduce the reader to the founding notion of this work. It is a notion I call extraction. This is a process by which a person steps out of their own belief system with an aim of seeing more of the world. Note, I didn't say see the world differently, as one would wish to do through, cross-cultural exposure, for example. This type of seeing lends itself to the notion of subjectivity, the idea that truth is relative, it's what we make it to be, and dependent from the position we see it from. No, the notion behind extraction is not so much to add color to one's perceptions, but actual facts. What don't I see that I should see as a matter of fact rather than a matter of perspective or interest? If this question is pressing enough, then extraction becomes more than just a process of thought. It becomes a need. This process has such profound effects that it can be likened to a conversion, not so much to a new way of thinking or away from, a particular belief or ideology or whatever, but certainly outside what you presently held for a time, just a time. Okay, just a small time. The person takes all that they have believed to be true and good, all that was taught to them by their upbringing and culture, and, as a manner of speaking, holds their beliefs in the palm of their hand. Examining it as a production manager of a factory examines a sample of the factory output before a sale. He or she makes a decision whether to keep the sample for sale or throw it away in the hope that the factory produced something better. Now, extraction gives one power and authority over belief systems in just the same way, and consequently over your own identity, your ethics, your culture. Furthermore, there's nothing to say that, and I mean nothing to say that extraction leads to a person changing their beliefs. In fact, it probably will not. They simply possess an independence and a rational authority over them. That's all it means. More importantly, by having rational authority over their identity, they have authority over all arguments and information thrown at them concerning their identities and ethics and culture, and that of others. This power alone makes you a different person. It's almost like having a Superman, Superwoman ability. The reason why I equate extraction to a conversion is because it involves far more than just a change of mind. We are rational beings, yes, but we are fundamentally more sentimental and emotional than rational, especially regarding things that really matter to us. It is not arguments that get us to fall in love or react passionately to a good orator or make us insecure when our identities are challenged. Arguments may be involved in these processes, but it does not mean that the arguments themselves are defining. In fact, we constantly act against our better judgment because of how we feel. Philosophers know this. Furthermore, they know that there is no end to arguments, and that at the end of the day, we must just, get out of our armchairs, put the philosophy book down, and get on with our lives. Be a philosopher, says David Hume, but be still a man. However, this is not to say that philosophy falls short, or anywhere short, of having a very deep and profound impact on its consumers and practitioners. When a person is extracted, their whole paradigm of reality changes and their identity along with it. Is there a more fundamental way in which a person can be changed? In fact, I say extraction may even surpass the change that happens to a person after, say, losing a loved one or a major accident, except that extraction is not harmful. Their identity becomes one of an independent, rational being with the freedom to choose who to be and to live outside the power of those social, cultural, political influences that try to tell you who to be and how to be it. The process is so profound that I may even doubt that one has the ability, I do doubt that one has the ability to do it on their own. How can they? How can you? if the very means of extraction come from the ways in which we presently think. No, extraction requires an external input, philosophy. Given the change proposed by extraction, one cannot expect it to be anything but a robust, perhaps even difficult thing to go through. The process leaves the seeker in probably the most vulnerable position that they can be in. However, if they do manage to go through it, they will consider themselves better off, enlightened, even new. It is in analytic philosophy that the tools of extraction are harnessed, perfected, applied, and used to gain authority over prevailing beliefs. Kant did it to empiricism, Popper and Kuhn to the scientific realists, Hume to the religious. What beliefs and practices of our time do we need extraction from? What things do we believe in that could be blinding us, exploiting us, oppressing us, deceiving us? Whatever it is, we have a way to know this for ourselves. This is what I think philosophy does best. It holds the ability to extract a person from their ways of thinking and see reality and the beliefs it forms from an elevated position. Now, compare this to science. Thomas Kuhn rightly notes that the reason we associate science with progress is not because other disciplines do not make advances, in fact, quite the contrary, but rather that there is only room for one fundamental theory in science at a time. Whether it is quantum mechanics in physics or, evolutionary theory in natural biology or natural history, no two competing paradigms are ever in operation in the scientific community at one time. You do not walk into a geology department of a university to see some lectures teaching evolution and some teaching, revolution, geological revolution, catastrophes, or even 7-day creationism or whatever, The only time this may happen is a very period of transition from one fundamental theory to another, a transition we call a scientific revolution. The budding scientist learns about their theory through exemplars and textbooks published since the last revolution, and that has sole rights of knowledge in that community until the next revolution. It is therefore no surprise that despite the common conception of scientists being at the vanguard of human intellectual enterprise, they are actually very difficult people to debate with. They are taught to only ever see things one way. The reason is that there is little debate in science. The assessment of the undergraduates is not based on critical essays. They do not practice and give a chance to competing paradigms of thought. From the outset, a scientist is taught to see the world one way. They are very intelligent people, very precise calculators, and experts of the most complex methods and devices used to manipulate nature. This is not to say that they are independent thinkers. Their training simply leaves little room for something like extraction. Now compare this to most other disciplines. In economics, a student is taught both Marx and Smith. In theology, both realism and anti-realism about the deity. In ethics, a student learns utilitarianism, deontology, and virtue ethics in a single semester. And in all these disciplines, we have an academic department which would have academic departments which have researchers advocating each paradigm. One lecture you're being taught by someone who's really for, proposes, advocates this, theory, and the next lecture or in the next semester you'll have someone who, will preach the exact opposite or teach the exact opposite. Thus, a student in the arts and social sciences goes through a miniature form of extraction from the outset. They are trained to be independent thinkers, swinging to and fro between theories and ways of seeing the world. Philosophy is simply an elevated art or social science. I don't mean superior, in that it is less focused on the subject matter of reality and its phenomena, and more on the analytic tools used to systematize reality through theory formation. Philosophy removes itself from the day-to-day problems that make the content of most other disciplines and asks more abstract questions, the answers to which require tools for extraction. Whatever the student's beliefs about ethics, religion, sciences, science or politics, they will immediately be required to handle faults of their own view and consider alternatives, in their assessments, all the while learning the analytic apparatus that enables them to do so. To use an analogy, A scientist has a pair of very focused and advanced glasses to see very fine details of reality. But maybe they have stiffer necks and can only look in one general direction. Not only does an art and social scientist have a more flexible neck, they might actually have eyes around the back of their head and are able to see many different things at the same time. However, they're not quite as precise. Their eyesight isn't quite as good as a scientist. The science is profoundly rigorous. Anyway, this is why I believe in philosophy as well as the arts and social sciences in general. They make their students better independent thinkers that will be fun, and this is all fundamental for life's decisions. How to vote, who to marry, how to pursue happiness, how to define happiness in general. These disciplines better equip their students for genuine inquiry of truth and thus become better debaters, not only with others, but more crucially with themselves. That is why most citizens who get a degree in the arts and social sciences will have, at the very least, delved into some sort of substantial debate and therefore have an idea of what extraction looks like even at an academic level. I now aim to widen its scope and make it more available to everyone. I do not do this just because it can be done and is generally good practice to do. No. I do this because I do not know of a period in history when there was such an urgent need of it, where the lack of extraction has been a principal cause of so many evils in our world today. As I will show, so many evils, from religious extremism to the breakdown of mental health, can be significantly attributed to the absence of extraction. We've seen extraction on a socio-political scale before. It involved removing people and whole sections of society from traditional religion and communism and other insular cultures. Now, anyone who is religious or communist has either not been extracted at all or has chosen these beliefs after going through the process of extraction. They believe in something having seen the good and bad sides of it. And so, if you discuss religion or communism with one of its adherents today, you will either be debating with a narrow-minded person or an independent, perhaps even advanced thinker. They probably will not fall somewhere in between, like the rest of people in society who just go with the flow, go with the prevailing belief. Why is there such a desperate need for extraction today? It should not be difficult to guess. We live in an age of unparalleled mass information, mass media exposure. Its messages seldom do anything but offer sensational and sentimental, often irresistible, persuasions that render it almost impossible to be an independent thinker anymore. And here's the irony of our time. The more information we have available, the poorer thinkers we have become. How can this be? The most vivid form of information is, of course, visual. From the moment our senses are in operation, and from when our minds start to form concepts and ideas, we are given impressions of the world through a screen. A screen. Not reality, but a screen. Since impressions are more vivid to the mind than mere beliefs, the beliefs of today's human being are forged from the outset by what they see through a screen. Whether through the news or education or even entertainment, the impressions behind media messages prevail over all other influences and ideas that one learns from family, school, or tradition. Now, consider sex education. I believe society has been largely pretentious about this. Yes, we learn in school what it is in the school, and perhaps from our parents, what it is, but none of this can rival the influence of entertainment and films and music videos and pornography and so on. We behave as if we can rival these influences because we've had honest conversations with our children and taught them a few things in the classroom, only for the child to run straight to the book, phone, computer to get a dose of what really excites them and excites their fantasies, much of which, by the way, may fly in the face of everything that you've taught them. It will take more than mere education and debate to make an independent thinker. Impressions and messages on the screens have forged our ideas and beliefs on everything. Our identities, politics, morality, happiness, religion, And I mean everything. It is almost as if we are made to believe things without our consent. Those who have control over what is broadly broadcasted, our journalists, producers, film editors, and so on, have power that surpasses that of any head of government, at least in countries where governments do not control the media. They have the power to forge fundamental beliefs and behaviors of the millions who accept these beliefs or are even exposed to them. It is the power to persuade an individual without them knowing that they're being persuaded. No thinking, no debate, just harmless entertainment, harmless informing, the news or something. If the problems of our time include thinking differently about, say, climate change or understanding terrorism and war, dealing with poverty, low self-esteem and unhappiness, I do not think the fundamental solutions lie in discovering more facts and being more scientific. How can they, when we would dismiss them because they don't fit our way of seeing the world? What if our way of seeing the world makes us blind to the things that we should see and know? I'll illustrate this using an actual experiment by Thomas Kuhn, referred to, whom I've just referred to, about having fixed paradigms of thought. So participants of an experiment were shown every card in a deck. They were given a deck of cards and they were shown every card and asked to declare what they saw. When they were shown an ace of hearts, they had to say it was an ace of hearts, and so on. What the participants did not know was that the scientists had put two anomalies in the deck. Let's say that they were a black heart, obviously hearts are red, and a red spade, obviously, spades are black. When showed these anomalies, the participants would often call the black hearts a spade and the red spade, a card of hearts. In other words, when they came across new facts that were incongruent to their expectation, they literally did not see them. Thomas Kuhn likened this to paradigms, ways of seeing the world and thinking. If we come across new facts that do not fit our ways of thinking, just think about your beliefs on science, on religion, on politics, or whatever. If you see new facts that don't fit in your way of thinking, then we simply don't see them. Or worse, we might see them, but just either choose to ignore them and say that they're not significant enough. Therefore, what good will new facts do if they don't fit in our ways of thinking, if we literally don't see them? The need for extraction first comes through recognizing that information, the powers of producing information, of persuasion and belief forging, these are very significant in society. And they have the power to enforce and order certain paradigms. And this power has been unleashed upon the world with relatively few checks and balances. We call it free speech, but that's, far from the whole picture. Now, there is a reason for this, and it is very little to do with the principle of freedom of expression, and more to do with what lies behind the messages themselves. So what lies behind these messages? Well, they are the paradigms themselves. And now I like the use of the word paradigm rather than ideology, but, for ease, you can sort of interchange them. Anyway, for example, you hear people throwing around the word democracy as a protest to Brexit or Donald Trump, when it is a very system of democracy that gave them this power, or their power or their mandate. And that's what the notion of paradigm captures. It's not just the beliefs, but it is the assumptions around the beliefs, the attitudes, the psychological dispositions, the sentimental attachments, the whole thing. This is what a paradigm is. Now, when people, use democracy against Brexit as an argument against Brexit or Donald Trump, perhaps what they mean is to oppose some kind of open and liberal society that Brexit and Trump appear to be against. And that somehow there is a link between that openness and democracy. Now, I still haven't heard this link being made. I mean, I can sort of think of one, but it's certainly not made in the public domain. And the reason is that this claim is a way of how people, it's just a way that they express how they feel about Trump, and not really an apology of democracy itself. They will use their values as a way of expressing their disapproval, whether or not these arguments actually work. Now, Socrates was executed by the ancient Athenians for pointing out this very flaw in democracy. And over 2,000 years later, I still hear him say, hey, if you get democracy, then you will get things like Brexit and Trump. Democracy without the exercise of wisdom will err. So why are we surprised? Did democracy not give us both Hitler and Churchill? The link between democracy and liberal values, I think it needs to be fleshed out a little bit more, especially when it comes to Brexit and Trump. Democracy is a system, it's not a value. However, this value, or even moral link between democracy and liberal values, is just part of our paradigm. You can have democracy and still be illiberal without compromising anything about the former. This will be explained in one of the contradictions below. To drive the point home, do those who make the anti-Brexit and anti-Trump case feel that strongly against intolerance and deceit and aggression and sexism, especially with Trump, and suppression, even when manifested by foreign leaders? Fine. So where were they when Xi Jinping, the president of China, visited the UK in 2015? Where were the demonstrations against, Putin or Mohammed bin Salman and others? Now, I don't doubt that the sentiments against intolerance and suppression and these other vices are anything but sincere. They are very sincere grievances. Similarly, to take the other side, did those who support Brexit because of the loss of industrial jobs over the last few decades realize how many more jobs would be at risk of being lost if Brexit was actually carried out? I point this out to prove my overall point. It is the narrative that puts so much stress on, whether you're for or against Trump, for or against Brexit, that drives our sentiments, okay? Not actual facts or arguments. Our paradigms and thought styles are set and given to us without much independent thought, so that it no longer matters whether our views make sense or not. It does not matter if we contradict ourselves. That's not the aim. Certainly not the aim of information. It's trying to get you to take sides and take sides quickly. So in the mass information age, we are no longer free to think for ourselves. And only a process like extraction can make us rise above this sheepish adherence to common narratives, whatever they are. The nature of the link between messages and paradigms may seem rather obvious. Yes, there is no message without some way of thinking behind it. But nevertheless, the link has been grossly underappreciated and its effects largely underestimated. If we appreciated that there was a link between messages and the paradigms that produce them, then our engagement with any form of mass information, movie, a news item, social media, whatever, would be far more skeptical than it is at the moment. Instead, we just sit there and soak in the messages with almost complete passivity. If we knew what mass information was really doing, we would engage it with full alertness and vigilance of mind, like a watchman at the gate of our precious minds and hearts, asking questions of every stranger who wanted to enter, discerning their intentions, learning where they've come from and what they want to do, checking whether they've got hidden cargo. As it stands, there is no watchman at the gate for most of us when we consume mass information. So its messages get through, everything, your political view, what you should think about your own body, your definition of success. And these messages get through and start to condition our feelings and ways of thinking. Before we know it, we believe in this, we're against that. We think this leader, we hate this leader and love that one. We think this is beautiful, or I'm ugly because I don't look like this, or I don't have this type of lifestyle. Completely oblivious to the fact that those who produced information advance these messages for their own agendas, and many times their agendas are just profit. They just need to sell something. No one ever stops to ask, why is this subject important to this producer or editor or author, and what are they trying to get me to think and feel about this? To make matters worse, there is not one, but several competing paradigms in every society. In the West, the main disputes are between, say, the right and left in politics, maybe religion against, secularism. With conflicting ideologies comes conflicting messages, conflicting impressions, and thus conflicting paradigms. The result is, inevitably, a divided society, and this is the root of most of the ills of mankind. What is different now is that the world is now at the mercy of the most effective way of spreading these sentiments, of spreading ideologies, paradigms, and that is mass media. And since they persuade primarily through sentiment and not argument as such, because they're just not that effective, what they plant in the viewer or the listener is a heightened emotional sensitivity to opposing views. In other words, rather than members of different parts of society simply recognizing their differences and getting on, members are now taught to be angry, fearful, even hate opposing ways of thinking. These are the dominant sentiments in society. They come from both the left and the right, the religious, the secular, whatever, wherever. And, anger and intolerance just fills the air. And there's supposedly a strong advance for integration of different parts of society, certainly in the West, an integration that is celebrated and advocated using notions like tolerance and social cohesion and multiculturalism. On the whole, I actually haven't seen much of it, least of all from those who claim to advocate these values. Cohesion and a synchronized society of diverse cultures is far more an artificial feature of campaigns, political campaigns and adverts and movies than a feature of reality itself in the West anyway. In fact, what I see in real life is contrary to much of what I see on the screen. How is it that there is such a gulf between our beliefs and reality? The answer is that the producers of mass information have the authority and ability to give us adapted reflections of reality. And since we are almost completely dependent on mass media and mass information for the formation of our own views, we end up defending fiction rather than reality. Furthermore, our technology is advancing, not to make us better thinkers, but to make us more narrow-minded. The algorithms and artificial intelligence on our media platforms constantly feed us messages that confirm our bias. We are therefore almost unable to think differently. We're simply not given the chance. So how is it that we come to make such strong associations between what we see on our screen and reality? David Hume has at least he started a contribution. He simply argued that impressions are assailing on the mind and far more persuasive than concepts. One could almost appeal to, this is basically one of the origins of what we call psychology today. And there's, a huge mechanistic story in psychology about how visual impressions give rise to our own perceptions and expectations of reality. I watch a sitcom about life in another country, and I immediately believe that the sitcom represents reality in that country. Now, that fallacy is easy enough to identify, though almost impossible to resist, and that's the point. However, the story becomes trickier when normative notions are involved, not just descriptive. We watch the sitcom enough times and we not only start to think that that's what reality is like, we start to believe that that's what reality should be like. That's what relationships should be like. This is good and that is bad, and so on. Now, Hume famously argued that moving from description to normative, from is to should be, is fallacious. It's a fallacy. We can't move from descriptions to evaluative judgment about the world and maintain validity. Nevertheless, like so many fallacies Hume exposes, it is an inference we want to make. How much of advertising is based on this? I see an impression of a body image and immediately make a judgment that it is an ideal body and that I should look like that if I'm going to be called good looking. Why not just say, hey, nice looking guy or girl, but hey, so am I, and that's it. What has all this to do with extraction? After all, society has always operated under ideologies which themselves were understood by the few but adhered to by the many. What am I saying that's new? It is my intention to expose the most troubling part of today's reality. That the prevailing paradigms of our time and messages behind them lead to contradictions. By that I mean that we have been conditioned to believe things, want things, march and fight for things that actually falsify or defeat themselves. If we actually got what we wanted, then we would be worse off for the very reasons we wanted not to be worse off. In wanting happiness, we have made ourselves miserable. In believing in progress, we have actually put into effect processes of retrogression. In fighting for justice, we have made more room for injustice. What we think will heal will actually cause harm. The good we think we fight for is the very bad we desperately want not to happen. It is my aim to expose some of these contradictions. More importantly, these contradictions are, on the whole, gloomy, both on an individual and social scale. I actually hope that after exposing them, the ensuing debate proves me either, exaggerated or perhaps even wrong. But exaggerated, let's start with that. So if this book starts a process by which people honestly and openly perceive facts about the world and themselves, that exposes a more sanguine picture of reality, I will be relieved. I'll be more than happy to change my mind than maybe most authors about their work. Nevertheless, I will argue that the way that I argue the way that I do, because it's simply what I have seen and experienced myself. If I have seen wrong, or have had wrong explanations, and I'm later corrected, then all the better for me. However, until now, I'm not persuaded that this is the case. So I've read the scriptures of religions, the theories of philosophers and of ethics and politics and science and epistemology, obviously, because that's my training. I've read economics and gained a considerable aptitude in understanding at least of its basic maxims, and my historical knowledge and the identities that history and its narratives enshrine. I've wrestled with these and to some extent grasped some fundamental ones. And I mean, everyone has an identity and belongs to a group. I've traveled the world and I've lived through its recent changes. I'm an expert in, like most people, so I'm an expert in one field, well-versed in at least two or three, let's say two, and knowledgeable about several more. So my opinions are, at the very least, kind of informed. Even if they're wrong, you can be informed and wrong. So I'm not saying all this to boast or anything like that. There's lots of people and, far more knowledgeable than I am. But I'm simply doing it to demonstrate where the pursuit of understanding these contradictions have led me to. This book is about thought, yes, but it has also been lived. In exposing these contradictions, I give evidence of extraction and hope to fuel the desire for it, even positing it as a solution to the problems that I outline. Nevertheless, what you, the reader, decide to do is up to you. The moment I start to give guidance and persuade people what to do with this knowledge, I have in effect advanced my own view. Now, that's not the prime intention of this book. I'm not writing this to advance my own opinions. I'm writing this to expose fact and reality and the fallacious relations between ideas about this reality. This work has come from years of agitation and profound disturbance about the world as it is, and with the hope that the readers themselves can seek their own change. I firmly believe that with revised beliefs and a healthier, more relaxed paradigm, society has the power to stand up to the causes that lead to so much of its miseries. So, here's a list of the contradictions that occurred to me. There's only a few. Number 1, democracy equals less need for the people. Number 2, democracy equals the rule of ignorance. Number 3, democracy equals something best displayed outside the West. Number 4, democracy equals ineffective governance. Number 5, security equals instability. Number 6, financial salvation equals injustice. Number 7, political correctness equals suppression. Number 8, multiculturalism equals segregation. Number 9, multiculturalism equals anti-liberalism. Number 10, censorship equals more exposure. Number 11, moral progress equals immorality. Number 12, pornography equals unhappy sex. Number 13, social media equals loneliness. Number 14, value of life equals death. Number 15, abortion equals anti-feminism. Number 16, anti-immigration equals fear of locals. Number 17, profit equals poverty. Number 18, consumption equals unfulfillment. Number 19, growth equals recession. Number 20, capitalism equals lower quality. Number 21, socialism equals poverty. Number 22, socialism equals inefficiency. Number 23, education equals poorer thinking. Number 24, offense equals truth. Number 25, academia equals less knowledge. 26, Christianity equals anti-Bible. 27, Islam equals two Muhammads, or at least the two sides of Muhammad. 28, more science equals less observation. And 29, more science equals less progress.